Hey guys, welcome to our channel. So recently I've been getting a lot of questions and critiques about dummy parsing, so I quickly wanted to make this video to give my opinion and to explain a few things. Some people absolutely hate dummies, but there are definitely a few good reasons to get these little friends in your house. The most important reason is practice. You simply can't create a character and just get good, so to speak. So you need to learn a rotation, and the best way to learn is practice, 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 and practice some more. A good example of this is light attack weaving. Some people struggle a little bit when they change from a dual wield stamina to a staff magicka character, for example. As you can see here, for example, light attacks are one of your top DPS skills. They really hit hard. If you don't weave them in, you're going to lose a lot of DPS. So, as our healer Gogi would say, bully the dummy for a while, and when you are used to smooth rotation on a dummy, you will improve in real combat situations as well. A second reason why I really like dummies is for comparison. I've spent multiple hours with my friends here to compare sets, skills, HP, and so on. And you can use either the combat numbers, which you can see above the dummy. Some add-ons even allow you to see the name of the skill, or you can use your combat metrics reports, and this will show all the skills, critical hits, everything you need to know basically to know which setup is working best for you. Another reason why I really like these is because of teaching and learning. Some people like to give me the stop jerking off on your dummy and show us some real parses treatment. However, as a guild master, I get a lot of guildies asking me for help with their builds, and to me that's always the first priority. So for a build video, I could, for example, use a combat video like this one. However, you don't really get a clean view of everything that's happening unless you would start analyzing the buttons below on my combat bar. If you can see which ones I'm pressing, when I'm pressing them, and so on and so on. If you compare that with like a dummy, you can really see which skills I'm using. So it gives a much cleaner view of everything. It tends to give people a better idea of what skills you're using, how your bar swap cancelling, and so on. And besides that, I just feel in general a dummy parse is a lot cleaner because you don't have to deal with external influences when you're trying to teach something. In a raid, you are very dependent on the uptimes of, for example, combat prayer and alkosh. Maybe you have to block here and there, walk away, rest someone. There are just too many things influencing your parses, so people who are learning your build can't really compare and see how they are doing on their character, because not every group is going to work the exact same way. Besides all of these nice things, there's also a few not so good things about dummies. I absolutely love dummies, but I really hate when they're being abused to so-called cheese a dummy parse. I will show you guys a few examples on my Stam DK, but it applies to all classes, both Magicka, Stamina, each with their own versions of the so-called cheese. By cheese, I mainly refer to things that are being altered to make a dummy parse perfect. One of the biggest problems with dummies is penetration, and mainly how people abuse it. In itself, there's nothing really wrong with adapting for a dummy parse, but I've had multiple situations where a guildie would come to me saying, "Hey, I found this great build and this guy's pulling stupid numbers, but when I use it in our trial, I struggle like crazy to even get a decent parse." And a lot of that has to do with penetration. So I did a few self-buffed parses to show you guys the difference. I used the exact same gear on both of them. I only changed the Mundustone. So in this parse, I used the Shadow, which is the exact same one I would be using in raids. So in the other parse, I used the Lover, giving me extra penetration. You can see the final DPS is higher in the Lover parse. Of course, some things like critical hits will always influence that, so we can't really look at those. So we're just going to look at the damage which can't crit, like Reliquin and Valley. With a Shadow, you have lower penetration, so 9.9 and 11. With the Lover, your penetration will be a lot higher. On our Shadow parse, we have 4.1, 6.7 versus 4.7, 7.4. Our Valley, with penetration, 13k average, 16.8 max, and with Shadow, we drop down to 12 and 15.3. So in this case, that is completely normal because you don't have, for example, a tank helping you to debuff the resistance of the dummy, aka your enemy. So when you look at this, it looks like the lover would be the option to go for because you're obviously getting more DPS, better results with lover. But that is where the big problem is hiding. Before I explain the issue, I want to quickly talk about a few exceptions. Like some people don't want or can't change their build to the current so-called meta of Learn Sharp or Double Sharp. So if you're still using double infused daggers, for example, you will still need the lover as a Mundus. The second exception is learning groups in harder content. For example, when you are a runner in Veteran Cloud Rest and your group is not used to keeping up the debuffs yet, in those cases it might be helpful to run the lover until your group is comfortable debuffing. So using the lover is okay in those cases. And I'm also completely fine if you're running the lover to test some things, if you're solo parsing and you don't have anyone to help you. However, I have a massive problem with people abusing the lover to promote their builds as being the top-notch DPS build of the year. Because they're basically giving out wrong information that will lead to people being very disappointed in raids. So, if you remember, the self-buffed parses show that the lover is the option to go for, right? So I could technically say, hey guys, this build is the absolute best, so use that everywhere and you will pull insane numbers in trials. However, in trials, you will get a group that is debuffing the resistances. So in these parses, we used the trial debuffs of the resistances. So we had a tank giving Crusher, using Alkosh, using Torux, we got Power of the Light, basically everything you would get in a normal raid as well. On this one, I used my normal setup with the Shadow. Penetration is also very normal and close to the resistance cap. Now, if I would use this amazing build with the lover in a raid, we go from this to this with the lover. Because I am getting a serious amount of over-penetration. And that's going to result in lower DPS. Again, we can look at Reliquin and Valley because we know those are not going to crit, and you can see that the difference is huge when you're overpenning. So with the Lover, I have an average of 5.7 Reliquin versus 7.9. With my normal setup, we go from 5 to 9 max. Valley, 14.9 with Lover, 17.8. Normal rate setup, 15 versus 19.2. So that's a good few K you're going to lose when you're overpenning. So please guys, think twice when you find this amazing build because you might not get those promised godlike DPS results when the person is influencing the penetration with things like Lover, extra penetration CP, twice fanged snake, and so on. The second thing I want to mention here is sustain. Some people use what is referred to as cheese foods. So for stamina, this is lava foot soup. When you're alone on a dummy, it's going to help you a lot with sustain because it's basically the same as if you would be getting orbs. However, I see some people using lava foot soup and they also have a healer throwing them orbs. So in that case, it's really not a fair parse. What cheese food does, it's going to give you a lot more stamina and stamina recovery than your gold food, like your Arteum. And also, compared to Dubious, it's going to be a lot higher. So if you would use this together with orbs, you will be able to sustain a high DPS rotation that consumes a lot of resources. However, you won't be able to use this in a raid because you don't get the health that is necessary to survive. So currently I'm on Dubious with my 16k health, stamina recovery. If I use cheese foods, you can see my health has dropped down a lot. My stamina has gone up, and so has my recovery. With food like this, you're just losing way too much health, and the fact of the matter is that DPS is no DPS. I know it's really nice to get super high numbers in a parse, but what's the value if you can't use it in a real combat situation? So when you are developing a build or rotation, make sure it's something that people can actually use outside of their houses. If you are trying out some stuff for yourself, make sure you always try out the real foods to make sure you can sustain it. Besides the food, Sustain is also a big influence without bad intentions. Sometimes you will find a nice set of skills, a rotation that works really well on a 3 million dummy, but you can't sustain it in a raid where the fight lasts a lot longer, or where you have to block or maybe heal a few times. And it also happens the other way around. Sometimes you're barely sustaining on a dummy, but in a raid you might be completely fine because of Warhorn uptimes, extra synergies. So always make sure you try the rotations both on a dummy and in raid so you can check if it works in both situations. If it only works in a raid but not on a dummy, don't worry, you're fine. However, if it's only working on a dummy and not in a raid, then you need to make a few changes. In a raid, a lot of things will influence your parse. Mechanics, buffs, debuffs, movement, and so on. And you need to pay attention to those things when you're using a build. For example, on a dummy, you are standing in the same position the entire fight. You're not really moving a lot. So for a Magicka character, for example, you will always be inside your little Zeroria circle. Your Zan is always going to hit the dummy. There's only one target, so your spell strategist is going to be super happy. But in a fight with multiple targets, or when you're moving a lot, like for example VAS, you might have to adapt your build a bit and choose sets which are fitting to the situation. For example, you can change to Mother Sorrow when you're moving a lot, and when you're in a ranged fight, you can swap out Zan for one piece Zan and one piece Iceheart to get a better crit. This also applies to the rotation itself, because a dummy fight is always static and a dummy always has the same health. You can technically develop a specific dummy rotation. This means you're going to calculate dummy percentages to use your skills at the right time to get the highest amount of DPS. And that might result in a very high dummy parse. But you can't really apply this in a real combat situation because every fight is going to be different. You will be fighting with different groups, different healers. Some bosses will die a lot faster with one group and last for ages with another group. You will be dealing with mechanics. You will have to heal maybe when a healer is dead. You will have to block, you will have to move. The last thing I want to mention is to always look at the combat metrics reports of the builds. I'm saying this because a lot of people are way too focused on the DPS number and sometimes feel disappointed when they're not getting similar results. So this is the only thing that matters. People will be focusing on that, people will be focusing on that, and they ignore everything that's over here, which is so important. Of course, you also have to check which gear is the person using, what's the CP, what's the food, and all of those things are normal, but some people use tricks to get higher parses just for the sake of showing them off. So the first important thing is to look at the buffs and the debuffs. Even when someone isn't in a group, they might still have someone in the back debuffing them or buffing them with, for example, combat prayer or powerful assaults. And if you are not getting those buffs, of course you will get lower results. Besides that, I personally don't think it's honest at all to advertise something as self-buffed with people buffing you off screen anyway, but luckily you can discover those things in the combat metrics report. So as I said earlier, for example, this is a self-buffed parse, and yes, I'm getting fracture, but that's my obnoxious breath giving me fracture, so you can see exact same numbers. No combat prayer in the back, no weird other buffs going on. So that's how you can check if something is really self-buffed or not. If we go to the raid buffs, I'm a stamina DK. This I'm not really going to be able to give myself, so there is a Templar helping out. I'm not wearing Alkosh, so this shouldn't be showing up if I would say this is a self-buffed parse, for example. The second thing you need to look at is the critical hits of the skills. Crits are always RNG to a certain extent, and with better crits, you're obviously going to get a better end result. Unfortunately, it is a fact that some people will literally do 500 parses to get that one lucky crit parse and then show it off as being their average DPS. These are all normal crits. No extremely weird numbers. If you see a parse where all of those are showing numbers over 80, 90, 100% for example, you really need to keep that RNG luck in mind. So please don't let someone's dummy parse discourage you, because the reasons for that high parse might have more to do with luck than with actual skill. So guys, definitely keep on using dummies to learn and to improve on your characters because they can really help you. You can learn so much on just trying out some stuff. You can practice your rotation and you can get better and better and better the more you do it. Just keep in mind that at the end of the day, your gameplay in real combat is a lot more important than what you're doing on a dummy. Dummies are amazing tools, but they are not the sacred end goal of your build. At the end of the day, a dummy parse doesn't define if you're a good player or not. What you do in dungeons, trials, and PvP is what really matters, not what you're doing on a dummy. And they are definitely not the way to check if a build is good or not, especially when a person is abusing chasing methods to promote their own builds. So always double check if the build is going to work for you, if it's going to work for the content that you want to play, because some people end up blaming themselves for really bad DPS numbers, and you might not be at all to blame. You might just be copying a build which is not appropriate for what you want to do. So definitely double check. Okay, thank you guys for watching, and I can promise you no dummies were traumatized during the making of this video.